The subway in the center of Sydney is crowded, with a constant flow of people, no different from usual. But because of the poison gas device placed on the subway, the city is about to face a catastrophic disaster. As the gas leaks, the driver is the first to perish, and the out-of-control subway subsequently overturns in the tunnel. The survivors who hurriedly fled thought they had narrowly escaped death, surviving the disaster, but little did they know that a few minutes later would be the end of their lives. Many of the victims went blind, their skin ulcerated, and they vomited blood until they died. The elderly Muslim, Nasa, intended to help a passenger contact their family, but was mistakenly identified by security as a terrorist taking advantage of the situation. Security immediately locked Nasa in a confinement room, and despite his repeated explanations, he never gained even a shred of trust. More terrifyingly, the security personnel suddenly died after inhaling a large amount of toxic gas, leaving only Nasa unharmed. The government immediately classified the incident as a terrorist attack, yet no organization claimed responsibility for the action. Best-selling author and political figure Pax gave a news interview, asserting that the mastermind behind this incident must be Islamic extremism. Officer Layla, who was at home, received a call from her father's side and immediately drove to the scene of the incident. Meanwhile, Jack, who was at home with the kids, also connected with his wife via video call. She had just gotten off the subway, and the situation was clearly not optimistic. Soon after, she arrived outside the house, but Jack didn't dare let her in. Who knows how contagious this virus is? His wife could only despairingly repeat that she just had a cold. Jack finally couldn't bear to abandon his beloved wife, but with a baby still in swaddling clothes, he didn't dare to take the risk. Layla arrived at the accident scene, and the situation there was nothing short of hellish. At the same time, Owen blocked the way, warning that the situation inside was extremely dangerous. But Layla owed it to her father, so she forced her way in and finally rescued her father from the sealed room. The situation was urgent, and the police suspected from the surveillance footage that her father was involved. Layla had no choice but to hand over the car keys, allowing him to hide in the secret room to avoid the spotlight. The vice president held a press conference immediately in response to the incident, but when faced with numerous media questions about racism, he could only make a hasty exit. The president was on a plane rushing to the scene, and he had to take charge of everything. However, the disappearance of his daughter at the subway station left him extremely anxious. With no more noise outside, Jack hurriedly packed his bags and took the child to escape from the city center. He gambled correctly. His wife indeed had perished, but the child survived, though forever losing her mother. Langston, the president of the medical company Entwa, came to visit the president, but the vice president refused Entwa's donation due to inter-party interests. Even though it seemed like the whole world was looking for him, the disappearance of his daughter made him decide to drop everything and set out alone to find her. Meanwhile, Layla found a suspicious person in the subway station's control room. Following them, she watched as they retrieved the gas device and handed a vaccine to a dying girl. Layla immediately rushed forward, but the alert suspect fled the scene at once. Layla could only turn back to ask the girl what the black substance she was injected with was, but the girl escaped the moment she started to recover. The vice president finally met with the president, who was calmly organizing the schedule. However, these plans were destined not to be carried out, as he too had been affected by the virus. Layla, who was pursuing the girl, passed by, and a survivor intended to step forward to help, but ended up being sprayed with poisonous blood. Medical personnel immediately tried to restrain Layla, so she had no choice but to turn and run, eventually collapsing from the poison. Fortunately, the girl injected her with the vaccine in time, allowing Layla to narrowly escape disaster. Everything falls into my hands. The worried vice president received an anonymous call, specifically naming him to succeed the presidency. The caller's reason was irrefutable, as the vice president's daughter was in their hands. The vice president was left in shock. A frantic Jack suddenly appeared, pleading for a ride, which startled the vice president, causing him to order a hasty escape. Jack cautiously avoided the police who were directing the infected to gather, and sure enough, the next second he heard the screams of the infected being burned and slaughtered. Layla returned to the police station and with Owen's help logged into the system, successfully retrieving the girl's personal information through the fingerprint on the syringe. Without any hesitation, Layla rushed to the girl's residence, but before the girl could explain the truth, a sniper instantly took her life. After some searching, Layla only found a signed book left by pigs. In a daze, Jack was interviewed by reporters on the outskirts of the accident site. The reporters intentionally or unintentionally steered the conversation towards ethnic terrorism, but Jack was in no mood to discern. His mind was filled with the grief of his beloved wife's death, and at this moment, he only wished for the death penalty to be used on those bad people, so they could also feel the pain before dying. Yeah, no! I'll talk to him again. As soon as the vice president arrived at the office, he received an envelope from a stranger. It detailed the legislation they hoped he would introduce after becoming president. He directly and sternly refused, but the other party subtly hinted at him to think about his daughter. With no other choice, he had to announce a new surveillance and special ethnic arrest bill at the inauguration press conference as a response to the terrorist attack. Although this move would cause racial discrimination, he had no choice as he was desperate to save his daughter. This shocking news, combined with the media's selective editing of Jack's interview footage, successfully stirred up a nationwide uproar. A major change is quietly brewing. Layla went to Peck's house to question him about his relationship with the girl, but he led her to a gas device intending to kill her. However, he was unaware that Layla had already been vaccinated, and she was able to take him back to the police station. At the same time, the newly inaugurated president also received news about the vaccine. The medical company has successfully developed an antidote serum and is just waiting for the official announcement to put it into use. As for the price, it was unsurprisingly expensive. Layla used the girl's photo to successfully break down Peck's psychological defenses. Just as he was about to reveal the truth, the police chief barged in, insisting that the suspect be interrogated according to proper procedures. Even though Layla laid out all the evidence one by one, the chief insisted that he had no authority to enforce the law since he was suspended. All the evidence was obtained through illegal means and had no legal validity. In a fit of anger, Layla headbutted him and was immediately arrested by Owen on the spot. However, the other party clearly had an unusual relationship with him and quietly released him when no one was around. But when Layla returned to Peck's house again, it was already deserted. During the vaccine press conference held by the president and the prime minister, an aggressive journalist brought a Muslim female doctor to challenge them. The doctor, affected by the new bill, was treated unfairly and was publicly searched by having her clothes pulled open. This news was also seen by Layla and her father, but the father pointed out that some time ago, a medical company happened to be offering free flu vaccinations at the Islamic Religious Center, which was the same as the one in the footage, and that's why he survived the incident. Connecting all the clues, Layla hurriedly sought out Owen to understand the internal situation, only to learn that her father had been named the prime suspect in the incident by the National Opposition Organization. The two immediately drove to find him, and at this time, old Nasser had already arrived outside the Islamic Religious Center, where a pig's head used for protest was dripping with blood. Old Nasser was heartbroken, but suddenly encountered Jack, who came to cause trouble. In the scuffle, Jack accidentally knocked old Nasser to the ground. Seeing the blood flowing from his head, Jack suddenly realized that he had made a grave mistake. At this moment, he was not the only one heartbroken. The president also received a video message showing his kidnapped daughter being harmed. When Layla arrived at the scene of the accident, she only found her father's cold body. She frantically attacked Jack, hitting and pushing him, until she was brought back to her senses by the sound of gunfire. She's good. In the news, the president publicly spoke out, directing all blame towards Islamic extremists, even openly suspecting that old Nasser was the mastermind behind everything. Layla was furious. This matter was far from over. The president's remarks were widely supported by racist groups, yet she found herself locked inside a car by a stranger. Owen was very worried about Layla's condition, but before she could make a call, she encountered persecution against Muslims by racists. Seeing that the violent incident was about to escalate into an assault on police, Owen had no choice but to drive away. Under the support of the new bill, Jack was convicted of a misdemeanor, and with the bail paid by a stranger, he was spared from imprisonment. Just released from prison, he was warmly welcomed by a group of racists. Everyone was proud of his remarks in the news and admired his actions against the old Nasser. At this moment, Jack was already regarded as a leader by the discriminators, and their leader even came to his home to invite him to give a speech to the gathered crowd. Although Jack repeatedly explained that everything that happened was not his intention, under the coercion and temptation of the other party, he could only give in. When the time came, Jack had second thoughts again, but the leader threatened him with his daughter. Helpless, Jack agreed to give the speech. When the president woke up, he was already at Layla's secret base, thinking on one hand that the other party was the mastermind behind his daughter's kidnapping, and on the other hand, that they were the true culprit behind his father's death. What a huge misunderstanding this is. Layla questioned him about the proposed bill that unjustly wronged the church community, determined to avenge her father, but the president revealed the truth about being threatened. When Layla saw the video on her phone, she realized she had made a huge blunder. As a way to make amends, she immediately launched an investigation based on the video, and indeed found some clues. the president immediately recognized it as an abandoned underground train tunnel. After all, she had served as the Minister of Transportation for 5 years. She was naturally very familiar with such distinctive markings. She immediately pinpointed her daughter's location on the map. The two rushed over and indeed found the daughter tied up there. Although the adversaries had set an ambush, the president, driven by maternal strength, was clearly not to be underestimated. In the critical moment, Layla successfully shot the guard and escorted the mother and daughter to safety. Along the way, various atrocities were being committed everywhere, and even the media was targeting all Muslims. Layla infiltrated the medical company, and besides the vaccination records, she also successfully found the syringes used for the vaccine in a file cabinet. Indeed, being a police officer requires talent. After connecting all the clues, everything pointed to the president of the medical company, Langston, as the center of the events. He immediately went to find Owen, informing him that his deduction was that the medical company orchestrated everything. They had Muslims vaccinated, then launched terrorist attacks, kidnapped the president's daughter as leverage, and forced the introduction of new legislation. This was all to focus public attention on Islam, allowing them to sell vaccines and make a fortune, while also gaining control over the government and manipulating the entire country. But after hearing all this, Owen just thought he was truly crazy. The news had already issued a wanted notice for Layla, and her actions with her father in the subway station were broadcasted as evidence on televisions in countless homes. Even Owen, who had always protected her, advised her to turn herself in. But Layla would not sit and wait for her doom. She suddenly attacked Owen, locked the door, and made her escape. It was another familiar morning, yet the entire country now felt incredibly unfamiliar. Conflicts were erupting all over the nation, and a war concerning different races had already begun. Layla found the president and asked him to testify and expose Langston's crimes, but the president, having gone through all this, was already exhausted both physically and mentally. He had already submitted his resignation, prepared to retreat into seclusion with his daughter, determined to stay away from the conflicts, and no longer willing to get involved in anything. At this moment, Layla was truly abandoned by everyone. But when a fugitive has nowhere left to retreat, it is the day death arrives. Layla, alone, sneaked into Langston's house and unexpectedly found the long-missing Pax there. Before he could make a move, Langston came in with a gun. Layla immediately used Pax as leverage, but Langston completely disregarded the safety of his stepson. Now that the major plan was accomplished, there was no need to keep the pawn. After dealing with the stepson, old Langston began the final review. This society is beyond saving, and his actions were merely a catalyst. The train has already started, and he intends to use this to establish a brand new country. But Layla had no interest in listening to his nonsense. She grabbed the train model from the table and knocked him to the ground. All the grievances and unwillingness, the deep love for her father, and her sense of justice as a police officer made it impossible for her to stop. When she realized that Langston had already passed away, Layla reacted by fleeing the scene, only to run into Owen rushing in at the door. He gave up the idea of attacking Layla and instead kept reassuring her. Layla finally let down her guard and believed Owen's offer to help her through the difficult times. But just at the moment they embraced, Owen implanted a tracking device on her, forcing Layla to continue her escape. Back at her hideout, she hurriedly destroyed the evidence, and just as she was about to remove the tracker, she heard a loud knocking at the door. A radical racist group had gathered outside, and Layla was ready to resist at the slightest provocation, but she was ultimately overpowered by the crowd. The leader called Jack forward to fulfill the wish he had expressed during an interview. At this moment, Jack was like a walking corpse, his mind controlled by the crowd, and Layla finally felt death approaching, crying out in despair. However, the blade swung did not strike her neck. At the last moment, Jack regained his senses and raised the knife to confront the crowd. But what could the two of them do? The end of this chapter.